Alright, let's do this.
Today we're diving into something that has a huge impact on both comic fans and creators like myself. Ultimate Spider-Man. Specifically the first volume. If you're new here, I'm currently working on my own comic, and I find that, analyzing existing works really helps me refine my own storytelling and artistic approach. Criticizing and studying a work is important to grow as a creative. It doesn't just have to apply for comics, or even art for that matter. So, let's explore how this iconic series can teach us a thing or two about making comics. But before this, I do need to give you some context for Ultimate Spider-Man. Spider-Man has been around a long time, well over 60 years at this point, and a lot of Spider-Man comics have come out between 1962 and now. And due to the nature of how American comics work, it's really difficult to know where to come in and start reading. Where does a new reader come in and start? Do you start with Amazing Spider-Man #1? I mean, you could. Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's run might show a bit of its age, but it's not a bad choice, I suppose. But I think we could, go with something a bit more modern with Ultimate Spider-Man instead. But, well, now that I think about it, Ultimate Spider-Man has been around for 24 years. So, in itself, it's actually pretty old. Well, at the time, it was one of the best reimaginings of the webhead. So, I suppose I want to glaze/review it. For the sake of transparency, Ultimate Spider-Man is one of the first comics I got into as a kid and early teenager. Spider-Man is one of the characters that I drew over and over again as a kid, alongside, a few DBZ characters and Pokemon.
Now, 90s dance!
The 90s. Anyway, Ultimate Spider-Man is one of my favorite iterations of Peter Parker, with the 90s animated show.
You can't escape me!
And then the Sony's Marvel Spider-Man for PlayStation 4 up there as well. Anyway, this comic is one of the reasons why I wanted to start drawing comics in the first place. Bendis' writing in this is top-notch, and Bagley's art is one of my art's early inspirations as a kid. I mean, I traced his stuff all the time back then, just to try and figure out his stuff. The combination between the two is a great match, by the way. Also wanted to let you know that what the B-roll that you're seeing is me inking over Mark Bagley's pencils. So you might be going okay, he's tracing, which fair, inking kind of is that, but I figured doing ink studies is one of the best ways of trying to understand another artist's workflow. What are their thoughts? Why did they put the lines there? This is something that I have not done in a very, very long time, but it is great learning, and honestly, I really did need some B-roll, and I didn't want to just, pop down Spider-Man for PlayStation 4 and that B-roll while I have, other stuff up. So that's why this is here. So, just letting you know. They had a 110 issue run together, which beat Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's run on Fantastic Four, which was the longest continuity run for Marvel Comics. That's hella impressive. Bagley does leave the comic, for a few years, but comes back, for the finale of the run. But today, I just really want to focus on Power and Responsibility, and hopefully turn this into a series and cover each of the volumes in their own videos. The first arc is Powerless. It opens up with Norman Osborn, I really wanted to say Norman Reedus, creating the spider, which you will notice that is a very similar to the Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire. Before this comic, Norman had nothing to do with that, but I think it's a great choice. Having our future villain be tied to our hero more is a great choice, especially when you consider all that shit that Norman will do for Peter's life in the story. We'll get there eventually. Also, it's kind of crazy that all of this happens because Yes Man didn't close the tube. Soon after, we do open up with an introduction with Peter Parker at the food court studying at the mall. Who does that? I never studied at the mall, ever. I don't even know anyone who had. Anyway, we see him get hit with some food by Flash Thompson and Kong. Can we take a sec to talk about Flash's bowl cut? Looks like Jim Carrey in that one movie.
That's a lovely accent you have.
Also, I want to take a sec to show Peter's John Romita's design compared to this Mark Bagley design. I really don't like the Romita hairstyle for Peter. I know, that is like classic Spider-Man. Mind you, John Romita is a fantastic artist, but I definitely prefer this updated Bagley design with the 90s window curtain hairstyle more. I do know people will disagree with me on that though, but hey, we do get an introduction to Mary Jane and long-haired foxy grandpa Uncle Ben. This guy had to be a hippie back in the day. But yeah, Ben calls MJ over to Peter to talk to her, and it seems like she's already like a family friend. We then see later at school that Flash and Kong are messing with Peter, but are stopped by Harry Osborn, who then talks to Peter about not getting in their way, and we see Peter respond in a sarcastic manner. Yeah, silly me for walking down the hall. What was I thinking? We're already seeing some sarcastic Spider-Man humor leaking through, and this Peter Parker is extremely sarcastic. I want to bring up is the consolidation of the story, like both MJ and Harry Osborn and a few other important characters are introduced a lot sooner than in like the mainline series. So we can get to like our fan favorites and we'll get to know those relationships a lot sooner, which is fantastic. We then go to the next scene where it's Jim, and Peter is being yelled at for, not being good at basketball, and he gets ridiculed by his coach and his classmate. Coach says he throws like a woman, and Flash says that he should wear a sundress, and we really start seeing that anger fuming. We then go to the Parker residence with Aunt May, talking about Peter might have social anxiety, which is so wild to me that people were bringing this up in 2000. Of course, Uncle Ben just says that Peter's just contemplating. We then get Peter and Harry hanging out in Peter's basement, and we get some sort of insight that Peter's parents died in a plane crash, and he inherited a lot of his dad's lab stuff, and that his dad was working on a molecular adhesive. Gives us some foreshadowing on Spider-Man's webbing. It makes way more sense than some 15-year-old had the know-how and the equipment to make web shooters. We do see Harry at home talking to Norman about his class visiting Osborn Industries, but Norman is freaking out about his latest project, so we kind of see a lot of that development on Harry and his dad's complex relationship. The following day, we do get to see the class going to Oscorp. What could possibly go wrong here, I wonder? Of course, Peter gets bit by the spider. No one could have seen that coming. And that is one big spider too. It lands on MJ and she freaks out and Kong crushes it. And Peter's, starts passing out, which will become a bit of a trend in this book. Oscorp has a record that Peter got bit by the 00 spider, which I want to make a note of because 10 years later from this issue that came out in 2000 and around like the 150 issue mark, this will play out. If I'm not being clear, it's a setup for Miles Morales because he has a numbered spider as well. Not that I think like Bendis was planning that far back though. It's a good 10 years, really. Anyway, I'll get to that eventually. Norman pays for Peter's hospital bill as they want to keep an eye on him because they want to see how these unofficial human trials are gonna go. Of course, when Peter gets back to school, he gets harassed about, the spider bite. Damn, this kid can't catch a break. Kong then kicks Peter, but his spider sense kicks in, and for the first time, he dodges and flips Kong and then passes out. Like I said, this is gonna be a trend. Peter then wakes up in the hospital, and then they take a blood sample. Our nurse also remarks about Peter's thick skin, so we're seeing some sort of examples of his powers kicking in slowly. They plan a hit on Peter to cover the whole entire thing up. A guy tries to run Peter over with his car, and of course his spider sense kicks in, and we get this slick panel of him flipping over the car. They report back to Norman about this, who now wants to study him. Peter starts researching himself and of course skips school, which causes him to bump heads with Uncle Ben, which gets him sent to his room. And at the end of the issue, we get to see Peter climbing on the ceiling with this really cool splash page. Let's get into issue 2. Everyone is in this class. Peter, as Flash and Kong call it, spaces out and he breaks his desk and falls over to the floor and of course is ridiculed. As the name of the issue is called Growing Pains. When he's in the bathroom, he discovers that he now has muscles. We then cut to the gym again and Flash is hitting on MJ, who is clearly uncomfortable, and Peter throws the ball right at his face, and Peter tells him to back off, and of course, Flash wants to square up after school. This doesn't go his way because Peter is dodging all of his shots, and then he catches his fist, breaking his hand. Kong later goes back to Harry's place and tells him all of this, and of course Norman overhears this and tells Harry to bring Peter to the lab tomorrow for a personal tour due to the whole spider bite stuff. Then we go back to the Parker residence, finding out that the Thompsons are going to sue if they don't, flip the bill. Peter gets lectured about it and then flips out and then runs off. We do get some back and forth with Aunt May and Uncle Ben worried about paying for it, so we do see that Parker money issue being introduced here. Peter will blow off some steam, and the next morning he no longer needs those Harry Potter glasses and apologizes to Aunt May and Uncle Ben. I'm not gonna lie, it is very strange to see Uncle Ben alive for this long. Next we have Peter and Harry at Oscorp on the tour and meet Otto Octavius, which is awesome that we get like a build up for all these future villains and tying that Spider-Man lore closer together. Doc Ock shows him around and takes some of Peter's blood without consent, and Peter freaks out and bails. Ock then shows his findings to Norman that Peter is in way better shape and health. This makes Norman want to recreate the experiment. Now, on to issue 3, where Norman is with the board wanting to recreate the dubbed Parker incident. Then we switch over to a wrestling show with Peter, MJ, Flash, and Kong in attendance, where we see Crusher Hogan challenge anyone in the audience. Flash suggests Peter, and Peter has like the greatest comeback. You know what, Flash? How about you hop in the ring? And when you lose, your family can sue his family. Damn, Parker. As fun as this was, I don't understand why MJ and Peter are hanging out with these two. I mean, maybe if Harry was there, as he's friends with everyone, it would, make some sort of sense, but I can't see Flash or Peter choosing to hang out with each other. Boom, you know what? Look at that, my first nitpick. So, editing Dean here. As I'm editing this, was like re-looking over the scans because to put the video together. I noticed that in this one panel right here, that's Harry Osborn. He does not have any speaking lines whatsoever, but he is here, and he does not show up in any other panels. I just really wish that, Harry would have had at least one thing to say during all of that to make it all make sense, but okay. Anyway, Peter makes a homemade suit and then returns and flips up there and then beats down Crusher to like the announcer in Crusher's surprise. You kind of see some slight subtle dialogue that this is against the regulation, but when you have a live show going on, you kind of just have to go with it. We also get to really see how brash Peter gets when he's like behind a mask, and especially when he has the strength to back it up. If this was one of Jameson's first impressions of Spider-Man, I can totally see why he thinks he's a menace. Peter uses his prize money to help his aunt and uncle as like a secret gift from the school. So Peter does have some sort of sense of responsibility, but he definitely has a bit of an ego, and that is seen when the guys are at school talking about, the wrestling match, and he is completely ignoring MJ to listen in on them. Then, to really hammer it home, his coach offers him a spot on the basketball team, much to Flash and MJ's dismay. But, of course, he has that vendetta against Flash, and of course Peter has to accept, and then goes buck wild in the game. And that ego is building up really, really nice and slow here. But we're also seeing, Peter screw up because of his decisions, like blowing off MJ to do another wrestling match. But hey, he does win his match, and he gets the base for his suit. What's really good about this is that it builds up Peter to get majorly humbled, and the reader just knows that it's coming. Even if you never read a Spider-Man comic before, we all know Uncle Ben is gonna bite the dust, and it's his fault. Then we cut to Osborn and his team experimenting on Norman with the formula, and Harry walks in and is escorted out. And then we hear a yell and then a look of shock on Harry's face. Issue 4 picks up with everyone pretty much dead outside of, Harry and Doc Ock, who have been pretty much beaten up and drawn away that you would think this was like a gore fest, but it's surprisingly not. It's said to be a lab accident, but Harry mentions his dad. We then flip to Spidey beating the brakes off of Crusher Hogan again. Who does this guy think he is? Big match, John? I don't think so. Anyway, we do see Spidey make a few digs at his opponent, which is on brand too, not gonna lie. Peter goes to pick up his cash from his match, but his bookie says the cash is gone. And Peter's pretty much blamed for it since he hasn't shown his face. And the whole talent is here, ready to jump him. And Pete just bolts and escapes. While he leaves the building, we get that classic Parker monologue where he talks about his bad luck and, what his options are. Then, as Peter's thinking, a criminal runs past him who just robbed the family deli and doesn't stop him, which totally won't come back to bite him in the near future, I promise. The owner is super angry with him, and I gotta say, he's just 15, and he's not even dressed up as Spider-Man. What do you expect him to do here? Take him? What if this guy has a gun? I mean, he did just rob your store, and you're like, hey kid, get shot in front of my family business. Wild. Anyway, Peter returns home and Uncle Ben is pissed. Turns out Peter's grades are slipping. See, I never had this problem as I was an underachiever in school, so my parents were never like, shit, you got a C? Take this kid to Olive Garden. But yeah, Pete's got like different priorities now, and that doesn't go well, and he does his thing, which is bail. Peter needs like a place to crash. Well, he can't go to MJ's or Harry's, so he decides to go to Kong's, who ends up agreeing. Look at Kong. Guy's got a heart of gold, you know, when Flash isn't around. Later, Kong is starting a party, and Flash isn't happy that Peter is here, but Kong says he's on the team, and they just need to look after each other. They also talk about Harry's dad, too. Liz Allen does talk to Peter about MJ and kind of pries about their relationship, which Peter says there's just nothing going on. We do see them for like the last issue that Mary Jane is a bit more on the nerd side than the party girl from the canon 616 universe, but honestly, even in other sort of iteration, it feels like they don't really know what to do with MJ. They done like the Lois Lane reporter thing with the 2018 video game, and I think maybe the animated series did that too. But in the past, she's been like a model or an actress. This version of Mary Jane is, I guess, fresh, but we haven't spent too much time with her yet to like really say. I guess later on we can do like a character breakdown. Back to Liz as she tries to kiss him, and MJ, she sees it and runs out when Peter goes after her. And guess who is at the door? Hippie Uncle Ben, who is scolding him for running away earlier and worrying Aunt May. Ben knows something is up with Peter, and Peter just kind of shuts down. Ben is trying to like, you know, get through to him.
How do I reach these kids?
And busts out his dad's old saying,
with great power comes great responsibility.
With great power comes great responsibility speed. Of course, Peter doesn't listen and runs off again. Damn those teenage hormones. We then cut to a silhouette of the ultimate Green Goblin and grunts burger. And we cut back to Pete, who's calmer, and he's like ready to talk to Aunt May and Uncle Ben. And we get to see him reacting to the police cars outside his house. Well, I think we all know where this is going. Issue 5 starts off with Harry in bed, hearing the screams of his mother, and the whole house is on fire. And we get the first really good look of Ultimate Green Goblin, who is a Hulk-like figure that can throw fireballs, which is like, I guess, a replacement for the traditional pumpkin bombs. Goblin versus Ultimate Green Goblin is some major differences. There's things I like about both, and this is meant to be like a fresh take on Goblin, but I'll get into that when I break down the characters later. We then cut to May talking to the police about the murder of Uncle Ben, and damn, this happens in their own home. Peter overhears the cops where the mugger might be, and of course goes after him. The guy is in the warehouse and Peter shows up there to deliver some vengeance and starts beating on him. He stops when he gets a good look at his face, and of course, it's the same mugger from the last issue. How shitty is that Parker look? Peter ends up tying him up and leaving him for the police as we see that Parker guilt hit him. This is the real moment when Spider-Man was born, and we see a sort of montage of him helping people. Peter returns home to see MJ there waiting for him to comfort him, and the guy just breaks down and closes out the issue. Now, on to issue 6 of the art. And then we open out with the Daily Bugle newspaper with JJ. The stories are going over this Spider-Man character and the burning of the Osborn home. Jameson is wanting to know if there's somehow a connection there and if this is the same guy as the wrestler. What I like about this is that we really get to show off how smart JJ really is, and he sees like a possible connection, and that this JJ is going to be more than just comic relief, and that this guy, you know, is a reporter at heart. We also do get a line about Kingpin and Matt Murdock when JJ and Ben Urich are like talking about their next story. It's the first time that we're mentioning characters like outside of that Spider-Man sphere as well, so that's always fun. We then cut to Peter finishing up his web shooters and being a huge nerd about it. Good to see Peter making stuff, you know, through science. Of course, it's late at night and Aunt May is telling him to go to bed, and he says he'll be fine. He's not fine, as he's asleep at his desk the next morning and then getting chewed out by his teacher. And we also learned that he quit the basketball team. How much time has passed from these two issues, I wonder? I wouldn't expect him to be at school that next week since, you know, his uncle died. The rest of the basketball team takes it rough, especially Kong and Flash. But before they get into it, Harry shows up surprising everyone. And then Peter's spider sense goes off and boom, school's catching on fire. Everyone rushes out and Harry believes that something is after him. Peter then, you know, sneaks off, suits up, and then heads back in as Spider-Man. Then Peter comes face to face with our not so Green Goblin wearing a hood / cloak. And then they start slugging it out. In this fight, we do get to see that wall crawler quipping, you know, the whole entire fight, which totally works on this version of Goblin. Peter tries to keep, you know, everyone safe by corralling him away from the school. Eventually, Goblin grabs him and then crashes him through the brick wall, into the football field, and then into like the air again. This guy can jump. And while in the air, Goblin grunts Parker again, which Peter is just asking, who is this guy really? We then jump into, we fall into issue 7 with Goblin throwing Spidey into the ground, you know, from the air. We do get like a tense moment of falling, and then Spidey tries to like web up a net to try and save himself from, you know, kissing the pavement.
Help! Please! Someone! I'm going to die!
It does work in the delight of Spidey, and he's still hanging in this fight. Helicopters show up, surprised to see, you know, a roided out Goblin, which of course attacks them. Spidey is trying to slow him down, you know, the best he can do. And then they just start shooting at Goblin, and then he just falls into the river. Then they start yelling at Spidey, and then tells him that he's under arrest. Spider-Man is bewildered by this, and then they start shooting at him too. Spidey's just able to escape. He just keeps on running. We cut back to school and the news reporter and first responders have arrived, and Peter was able to like sneak back into the school and pretend to be under some rubble. Flash and Kong think Goblin was the Hulk, so we do get confirmation that the Hulk exists in this world. The cops mention whatever it was, it's definitely dead. However, Harry confirms that it wasn't the Hulk, but his father instead. Harry outbursts that it killed his mother and burned down his house, and it was trying to kill him. Not sure that was his goal, Harry. I think, you know, going after Peter was, but the cops carry Harry away. And then Aunt May drives up worried about Peter. While that's happening, Peter's like putting together the whole entire thing, and that the thing that might have changed him changed Norman. Pete claims it doesn't matter and that this whole entire thing's over. Little does Pete know, you can't keep a good goblin down. But yeah, that does wrap up like the first volume of Ultimate Spider-Man. The comic does a great job of fleshing out the world of Spider-Man and the Ultimate Universe. Bendis and Bagley do a great job of really stretching out that first issue of Amazing Spider-Man that Stan and Steve Ditko did back in the 60s, and it's a pretty good retelling. I think they do a phenomenal job at capturing that teenage angst. Ben Parker is an actual character that we get to know fairly well before he catches a bullet, which is great. I like the idea of having Osborn being introduced in the story early and they get to tie his origins together. I mean, it's a good idea. 2 of the movie franchises take this. I like the cameo of Doc Ock, so we're already building towards something bigger here. Flash seems to be pretty spot on, and I do like the addition of Kong, so we have someone for Flash to like banter with. Aunt May and Mary Jane here are both just okay. There's not exactly much to really add or say about them, but I do know from reading the series that they both majorly develop later on, but it has been several years since I've actually read it, so we will see when I end up doing the next volume. I do think I would have rather see them do Gwen Stacy before doing MJ, but that's just me. Overall, I think their writing is very solid, and Bagley is probably one of the best Spider-Man artists ever. Also, keep in mind, he's already been drawing Spider-Man at that point for years. Got plenty of experience from other Spider-Man books.
So there is like 2 like major graphic design things that I really wanted to point out because I work as a professional graphic designer, so I definitely have some pretty strong opinions about this. So one thing being the drop shadow on this Spider-Man logo. Oh my god, it's so obnoxious. I know that it's like early 2000s when they were like probably created this logo, I mean, you probably really went crazy with the special effects that you could just like put on a layer, and oh my god, I hate it so much. And the other thing that I also wanted to like point out is that some of these chapters actually have like chapter names with like small logo on it with like a splash page, and I really enjoyed that, and I really wish more comics would do that. I don't know, I just think that it's a really cool, neat graphic design thing.
I'm looking forward to revisiting the rest of the run because we can learn a lot from Bendis and Bagley, and we can see them like also grow with their like 110 issue run.
So how do you end a video without making it sound, you know, awkward? Anyway, thanks for like sticking through with me on this, you know, wild ride for Spider-Man, and you know, hopefully you'll like, comment, subscribe, I guess. Do you really gotta say all that stuff? Anyway, okay, just go watch something else. Why are you still here?